For a lot of people, the transform effect is a real head scratcher because it has basically all the same properties that a layer has, like scale and position, opacity, rotation, all that kind of stuff. So it's like, why is that effect important? Well, there's actually a few cool tricks that I want to show you with this effect that make it so powerful and important. So what I'm going to do actually is turn off the visibility of the line layer. Oops, turn on the star layer, select it, double click to apply the transform effect. And here we have a lot of the same stuff: anchor point position, scale, rotation, opacity, etc. And the important thing to remember here is anchor point and position are a little bit different than they are in the layer. So if I were to click on anchor point and the effect control point for anchor point, and then click in the center of the star, well, that's not supposed to happen. And then if I were to rotate this, keep in mind that this is the anchor point over here. So let's say I moved the anchor point this way and I rotated this. Well, that's not rotating around that anchor point either. So what actually is the case here is that the position point is kind of like the anchor point of this effect. So what we need to do is, this is the position point. So if I click and drag it, I could move around the star here. So what I need to do is move the anchor point around so that the position point is in the center. And then when I rotate or when I scale, it all happens from this position point. Kind of wacky. One of the things you also find in the transform effect is skew that we don't have in the layer here. So I can increase the skew value, and maybe I don't want it to skew on that axis, so I could change the skew axis. So it kind of skews around like so. It's kind of fun. And then of course we have rotation and opacity. Now, a couple really important things about this effect. Number one, this thing right here, use composition shutter angle. The transform effect is kind of subtle because it seems to say, well, okay, we could just, change position again or do like small, simple things. But really, this is another really cool feature of transform, that you can actually have an object use its own shutter angle. Now, shutter angle is used for calculating motion blur. So let's say you have an object moving and you want one single object to have its own motion blur. Typically, motion blur is something that's done in comp settings. If I select a composition in the timeline and hit Control K or Command K, up comes the composition settings. I go to the Advanced tab, and then here's the shutter angle for under the motion blur area. And basically, that sets the shutter angle for the entire composition. So this transform effect also allows you to override the entire composition shutter angle and use its own per layer shutter angle, which is awesome. Now I'm going to reset this. I'm actually going to delete this transform effect. And I'm actually going to move this shape layer down the center. And here's the line. Maybe, how's that? That looks good. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, let's say I wanted to move these objects together. I wanted to move them up or down or rotate them as one. Well, any seasoned After Effects veteran would say, well, first thing you got to do is you got to pre-compose them so that they're one. Well, not necessarily. What I can do is right-click, select New, create an adjustment layer, and then I apply the transform effect to the adjustment layer. And now the transform effect affects everything beneath it. So I can scale both objects at once. I can adjust the Y position of both objects at once. I can rotate both objects at once as if they were one layer. And you might be saying, well, you could do a lot of that with parenting. But guess what? You can't do opacity with parenting. So this is one way that you can do a lot of really cool tricks without having to pre-compose. I love pre-composing, don't get me wrong, but sometimes compartmentalizing a lot of layers into a single pre-composition, I don't like that. I don't like them having tucked away and stored all the time. So sometimes applying transform to an adjustment layer is a great workaround for that. Now you might be asking yourself, when would I ever use this? Keep in mind that you can basically do a lot of stuff that pre-composing does with the transform effect applied to an adjustment layer, and I promise you that there'll be many occasions that you will say to yourself, wow, you know what I can do? I can just put transform on an adjustment layer. Hence is the power of the transform effect.